futuristic setting makes for some of the most fascinating games in the racing genre. It allows the developers to truly create their own type of unique racing discipline, rather than being confined to cars with wheels. While a majority of these will fall under hovercraft racing, it can also allow developers to build a new world to house their futuristic racing ambitions. Cyber Speedway is a game that does all these things, but doesn't really stand out well enough among its contemporaries to become something truly special. But it does get it where it counts. Released early in the Saturn's life in 1995, Cyber Speedway is a futuristic hovercraft racing game developed by Nextech, which they have quite a pedigree. Seriously, you should look these guys up. The game offers a nice variety of play modes, story mode, and a free run mode that includes time attack and multiplayer racing. Story mode has you playing as this guy? Damn, what's his name again?
Clay Shaw's the name.
Yep, that's it. You've been contacted by the government to represent Earth in an intergalactic Grand Prix. So now you and your Samurai Goro Wario Pitman looking guy race against a number of very interesting looking creatures.
Aaron Clay Shaw. Skim it.
I mean, look at this guy. I have no idea where his face starts.
Introduce myself. I am Zahanic of Caladesia.
Which orifice are your words coming out of? All in all, the story doesn't really matter at all. It just provides a forgettable context for the racing. You have 2 different difficulty levels to choose from, which determines which tracks you race on. There are 6 different worlds to conquer, each with 2 different circuits. An early Saturn racing game with 12 tracks? That's a pretty hefty amount of content. There's also 5 different vehicles to choose from in the free run mode. Though when you play story mode, you're restricted to 1 craft throughout the entire Grand Prix, which is pretty lame. To make up for this, you can customize different characteristics of your craft, like speed, handling, and opting for more boost or shield power. Once you've outfitted your racer, it's race time! Controlling your craft in Cyber Speedway feels pretty good. It may feel a bit stiff at first, but once you get used to it, it's pretty solid, and that's also thanks to the game's unique booster system. Your vehicle has 3 boosters, one on the back, and one on the left and right sides. The shoulder buttons activate the side boosters, while acceleration activates the one on the back. Rather than in other futuristic racing games that allow you to kind of strafe or lean into a turn with the shoulder buttons, the boosters in Cyber Speedway give you a slight jolt in that direction. You can only boost so many times in a row though, which is kept up with the boost gauge on the right. You can increase the boost charge speed if you spec out your craft properly. Weaving in and out of turns and using the boosters to help keep your speed around corners can make for a fun and exhilarating experience, especially in the later stages where the corners can get pretty intense. You gotta be wary about your surroundings though, as your craft can actually take damage, which is displayed with the shield gauge. There's also missile weapon pickups that you can use to be on the offensive, though it's incredibly difficult to hit anyone with a missile, as they just seem to fly right over your opponents. While the racing feels pretty good in my opinion, the presentation seems to be all over the place. The graphics are incredibly dated, but given how early this game came out on the system, it's to be expected. The performance is also really hit and miss. The frame rate suffers from too much stuff on screen, like racers, and the amount of geometry in the environments. Playing in the hood cam helps alleviate this, but doing so will have you miss out on my favorite feature. That's your craft's animated physics. When you go into a turn or collide with the environments or other racers, your vehicle will go spinning and tumbling in a very convincing way. None of this has any real effect on your vehicle's handling, but it still looks pretty cool. Probably the most questionable aspect of its presentation is the soundtrack. When the game was originally released in Japan as Grand Chaser, it had its own unique, high-energy electronic soundtrack. When the game was brought over to the States, Sega of America instead had a new soundtrack for the game from the Bygone Dogs. Yeah, I've never heard of them either. It opted for a lame rockabilly tone rather than the original electronic soundtrack. You don't even have the option to listen to the original soundtrack in the options menu, which is really unfortunate. In the end, Cyber Speedway is a pretty fun racing game. The general consensus for this one is that it's pretty forgettable, and yeah, they're kinda right, but I thought the racing itself holds up pretty well. The game is still really affordable for both the Japanese and the American Sega Saturn, so if you find it at a good price, I'd say give it a shot.
Left 3.